Welcome everyone who's joining us. We are so excited to be here with you all. Happy New Year's. I'm pretty sure this new year has started off to a great start, hopefully. Hello, family. Hola, ¿cómo está mi familia? Welcome to everyone across the world. I am Hakimia Jackson, CEO of Divinely Powered, Global Executive Coach, DI Board Advisor, and today I'm going to be your moderator. I am dialing in from ATL, Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much for joining us on this growth experience, specifically on the topic of reducing regrettable turnover, lessons learned from 2022. So I would love to get to know you further because I don't know if you know this, but when I'm moderating a webinar, we're just not watching it. You are a part of the experience. That's right. Your insight and presence today is vital for the success of this experience. In fact, throughout the next hour, we'll be asking you all, our virtual community, to interact not only with our panelists, but with each other in the chat. So right now, I'm going to put you to work. The panelists and myself want to get to know you a little bit better. I need you to share 3 things for me: your name, where you're dialing in from, and one word that matters most to you, actually, regarding leadership. One word. What did 2022 teach you about leadership? Is it empathy, boundaries? You let me know. Trust, patience. I see you, Bethany. Alicia, yes. Inclusiveness. Welcome from Lubbock, Texas. Welcome to Breathe. Transparency. Welcome from Austin. I was in Houston about 2 years ago. Now I'm in Atlanta, like I shared. Resilience, grit. Yes. I love it. The chat is on fire. Transparency, compassion. Hi, Bonnie. Welcome, Melissa. Hi, Ann from Boston. Orange County, communication. Patience, Bethany. I hear you. Inclusion. Welcome from the NYC. I see you. Alexis from Houston. Anybody from Florida? Anyone from Tampa? Tolerance, Carl. I see you. Yes. Empathy. Orlando, Tampa. That's my hometown. So I'm looking forward to seeing more vital information show up in our chat today. Let's keep the momentum going. I want you to also go to the chat and let us know, what value are you seeking to gain from this webinar today on reducing regrettable turnover? What are you hoping to walk away with? Hi, Kathy from Vancouver, Deborah from Los Angeles, Jenny from New Hampshire. Welcome, welcome. Please share in the chat, what are you looking to walk away with throughout the webinar experience? Don't hesitate to share any meaningful resources that will benefit us all. Trust the principle of reciprocity. It goes a long way. Like my baby girl always says, sharing is caring. So show us some love and share what has worked for you as it pertains to this topic. There are so many valuable comments. Yes, retention ideas, learning from 2022, reducing turnover, strategies for turnover, how to address hidden issues, establishing approachable, going so fast, trying to keep up, state interviews, engagement and recognition. Thank you, Lynette. Francine, action leadership can take to reduce turnover. Hiring with longevity. Thank you so much, Danielle. Laura, understanding how to help leadership to move away from legacy norms as it relates to policies and structures that impact attrition. Thank you so much for sharing. So just a quick reminder, if anyone wants the SHRM credit, the code will be given out to participants at the end of the webinar today. So please stay tuned and connected with us for the entire webinar. 2022 was another year of turbulence and upheaval. Organizations around the world have been affected by global economic changes and rising costs in 2022, leading to difficult decisions and high anxiety about the road ahead. For those reasons, employers are having to provide more support for their anxious employees, from financial support to mental health, well-being program development. Many companies have taken steps to pivot and relook at the way they manage and motivate their teams. This unpredictable world we now live in has also reshaped how leaders must lead in 2023. So as we enter into 2023, If you decide not to prioritize your people, know that it's a sure way to unleash a revolving door of talent continuously entering and leaving the building, okay? But the more human-centric approach offered by empathetic leadership practices will only become more important if we desire to move forward together with our teams and our communities. But before we get into this amazing topic, I want to introduce our partners and expert panelists who will share briefly about their organization. With much respect and love, I introduce Cassandra, engagement consultant from 15-5, Shireen, manager of people and talent from Blueboard, Tiana, senior people operations specialist, who's also representing the amazing ThinkHuman community. And so first starting with Tiana, regrettable turnover indicates that we wish it didn't happen. It's a horrible thing. That was something that we could have done differently. Tell me about a time where turnover could have been avoided, whether you are a leader or individual contributor, or even just your own personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have been in organizations where there was potential to put the employee or employees that were leaving the organization into another position or another role or under another manager. And instead of making that realization, we continued to let them go. So just ensuring that, you know, when your employees are leaving an organization, that you're looking at all of the angles, and that there aren't other options before losing a valuable employee.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can jump into that topic. So thinking about in the past, regrettable turnover, I used to be a HR partner at an organization where there was a just rock star employee, high potential, high performer, and all of a sudden she put her notice in, and a lot of leadership were shocked because she was that person that just was always promoting the company, the go-to person. And what had happened is, because she was always considered that go-to person, and as the business started to get busier and busier, she kept getting added on responsibilities, but the support and resources did not come aligned with what additional expectations she had. And those who kind of knew her a little bit more personally had heard her speak up, but there was just that disconnect. And then all of a sudden she got to that point of burnout where it was already kind of too far gone. And the only option she felt she had was just to have a fresh start. And so that's where, and sorry if I seem a little out of breath dealing with a head cold here, but that's where the organization learned, like, you need to have processes in place to keep a pulse on employees. Things like manager check-ins. How are you doing? How is your stress level? Things like an employee engagement survey, getting some of that objective data that leadership can look at, that HR can look at, and just see how teams are doing. They started developing some of those practices, and it did help them overall.
Yeah, and in that story, I also hear being intentional about, you know, ensuring that your talent stays. And so, you know, distributing those employee engagement surveys are extremely important. Carissa says, that was me. So you told a story that was extremely relatable. She said, I left a director role in July and people were shocked. And I'm pretty sure she's not the only one here in the audience that have done that. You know, a lot of people who may have probably didn't feel a part of the organization or didn't feel valued or heard. We want to get ahead of that, so we're not experiencing this regrettable turnover. So Cassandra, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
My example is a bit more something we learned along the way within a department. So I've worked with organizations that have had a harder time finding sales talent, so account executives, and most of the time we see that sales talent it's hard to bring strong talent to a new company when they have existing relationships with clients and books of business. So anytime we would get a sales talent, like sales candidate, we would be very excited to bring them on board. My last organization had an incredible training program, but we recognized that we had a hard time retaining outside account executive hires into the company. And this was happening because We expected them to ramp up quickly, but there was a lot of complexity with our product and a difference in our type of environment. So the account executives would actually leave within a year of being employed, right? So that is something we saw over 2 to 3 years, and it was extremely regrettable, especially as the recruiter there, because it becomes expensive and it's time consuming. And in this department in particular, it's not painting the best picture for clients when they're getting a new AE every couple of months. So the way, basically, though this was something we couldn't have avoided until we went through it, we did recognize that while this was happening, the AEs that were the most successful in the sales department happened to be people that were promoted from sales development roles. And not only were they the longest tenured employees in the sales department, they were the longest tenured employees in the whole company. So the solution to this type of turnover, where we're looking at a department and a role that's just not sticking, is that we built out career paths and growth paths for the sales development team. We would hire talent that was like on the brink of becoming an account executive. And then after training and 6 months in the role, they actually had the opportunity to be promoted into the AE spot. It's like paid training for account executives. And so they know the business from the ground up. They've built these relationships with the clients already. And so I've left that organization, but I actually have seen that someone yesterday got promoted to a sales manager role, and he started as a sales development rep there when I was there. So it's really cool to see how they're maintaining this type of process in development to reduce that turnover on a department scale.
I love that. And I like how you walk through the process of them seeing how they can matriculate through the organization.
Yep.
Right. So their role is the beginning piece of them adding value, but they can add value all throughout the organization at so many different levels. And oftentimes, when you're in the thick of it, you may not see that, but with you spelling it out, making it plain, and writing a plan, it at least gives some people hope, right? Who may be contemplating turnover or leaving, excuse me. Darius had a question that I wanted to pull out from the community. He said, how do you get people to respond truthfully to those surveys? Most aren't comfortable sharing how they truly feel in engagement surveys and manager peaks.
I can dive into that. I think there's a few different aspects. One to begin with is having leadership approaching that engagement survey in a right way. So instead of having leadership trying to drill down and figure out who is that person that responded that way, really talking about it in the lens of, this is a great benchmark for us. We're going to learn from it. We're going to learn the themes, and we're not looking to identify any individuals. We're looking to better ourselves. So please give us your candid feedback, because we can't get better unless you are honest about that. And so that's one aspect. And then another aspect is using a survey that does have that lens of confidentiality, just to help employees feel that they have that safe zone, especially because not all leaders are great at some of that information. You might have an executive team who has a really good way of looking at it, but maybe some managers who aren't quite used to looking at surveys, looking at that data, and do come at it in the wrong way. So it's always good to have that layer of protection. Within 15Five's employee engagement survey, we have something called a rule of 5. So if a specific team or even like a specific segment of the data has less than 5 people in it, we will hide those responses. So you can't drill down so granular to see kind of more individual responses. We try and protect that confidentiality.
And
go ahead,
Sorry about that. I totally agree with you. I also think that when it comes to employee engagement surveys, taking action on what was said in the surveys is huge in an organization. We cannot just collect all of that data and then do nothing with it.
Yes.
It's so important to share those results with the organization, good and bad, and then take action on what was said, what is wanted, what is good, what is bad.
Yes. Diane agrees with you. Yes, action. Kelly says, totally agree on taking action. Leo, listening to what was said and what was not said. That is so true. Yes. And Cassandra, you mentioned on one of our calls together about allowing the data to tell a story. So instead of, because I see people saying, well, how do we get buy-in from leadership regarding engagement surveys? Elaborate a little bit further on just telling the story of the employee experience.
Yeah, so with employee engagement surveys, you want it to measure all different aspects of the employee experience. You want it to measure not just things like compensation, rewards. You want it to measure things like the purpose of the organization, even leadership integrity, leadership impressions. You want it to also measure that manager relationship. Is feedback happening? Do employees feel safe with their manager around psychological safety? So when you use a survey that does measure all those different aspects that really file into that employee engagement view, you're able to get that story, and you're able to see how something like psychological safety and role clarity have connection. So if you don't have role clarity, you don't know what's expected of you in your role, you're not going to feel confident. You're most likely not going to feel like you can be the one to speak up and say, I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what's expected of me. I'm going to charge forward with this. And so it's really good to have those different measurements, because you can tell that there's a connection between a lot of them. And then you get to that story, because your engagement survey should be giving you objective data. It should be giving you the lens of how all employees feel, or employees feel within that department or team. And it's subjective data, so you can rely on it more than anecdotal, but it can tell you that story of what's going on. If you maybe have a manager who's not well trained and maybe just needs a little bit more support about how to give feedback, how to not just say good job, but give redirection feedback, give really specific, great job because you emulated this value, you did this specific thing, we want to see more of that. So you can just really dig into things like that employee engagement survey and get just that really good deep pulse. I kind of call employee engagement surveys like that doctor checkup. You want your managers to be checking in on employees in the week to week, because you can't just show up to the doctor and never do anything beyond that. But
Right.
engagement surveys are really that big lift, or not really a big lift, but it's the big way to really dig in deep on all different areas.
Yeah. So once we go to the doctor visit, we get all the information that we need, then it's time, to Tiana's point, take action so that we can see the results. So when you think about just your leadership journey from 2022 to now, what makes turnover different now compared to 2022 and prior years? What actions are people taking?
I think that first and foremost, the ball is now in the employee's court. Organizations they're becoming people champions. They're becoming more people-centric. And so if an organization isn't offering what the employee wants or needs, they're going to go find an organization that will. I think a good example of that is all of the organizations that were in an office and then they went remote, and then they said, okay, we're going to make everyone go back into an office. Well, people were enjoying working remote. They were given the work-life alignment, the balance. And so they're going to go find an organization that is remote first, because there's more organizations that offer that. Or you also see organizations offering more stipends these days, work from home stipends, professional development stipends. And so if you're not helping your employees grow and develop, again, they're going to go find an organization that will. And I actually think it's a really great thing, because your people are your biggest asset to the organization. Yep. So you should want these things for your employees.
Right. Yep.
Yes, and Tiana a little bit. The workforce has not only changed, but I think it's continuing to change. So 2020 is different than 2021 from 2022. And we're now going to identify what 2023 looks like. So how we do business has changed. The working environments have changed. Quite honestly, we've changed. I know personally, my values changed through the pandemic as I became more educated around different, ways people show up in the world. So I personally left my organization and my last organization in 2021 because I changed. My values were no longer aligned with the organization. So it was tough for me to support a product and an industry that in my personal life I wasn't supporting. So I think company alignment, to what Tiana is saying a bit, is the most important thing. And company alignment really starts with us identifying what we want in an organization, or employees identifying what they want in an organization, either for their next step or to take a moment to reflect on their relationship to their company as is today. So that partnership should really be there. It's important to really check in with yourself, and the difference in environments can look, the factors of that can look very different. For me, it was industry and product. It could be like what Tiana is saying about working conditions, such as being remote or in office. It could be team size. There's so many different ways to identify if you're aligning with your organization.
Yeah. And to add on to that, a word that we use a lot in 15.5 is thriving. And so to that effect, I feel like a lot of people moved from a little bit more of that go to work kind of survive mentality to I really want to thrive. And something that I hear all the time is the focus on meaning since the pandemic hit. Everybody's lives kind of got paused, reset. Even those who might not have gotten COVID or had to worry as much as others about safety and health, everything else came to a halt. No more socializing, no more gym. And so people are spending more time with family and thinking about what was really meaningful to them. And then really thinking about, what do I want to do for the rest of my life work-wise? Do I want to go to a job where it's just work? Or do I want to feel like my job is developing me personally as well as professionally? And so I think that's something that has continued to shift, even with the younger generations entering the workforce.
Yes.
Of all the clients I talk to, because I'm an employee engagement consultant, meaning is typically 80 to 90% the most influential aspect to engagement for their companies, because we do measure the different influencers of the different aspects to engagement. And it's just that desire to be able to focus on growing yourself as you help the business achieve its goals. So that holistic view of what makes the person and what is really important to them. And that's where it's important to think about not just creating a great culture for the organization, but then thinking about individuals, not seeing them just as cogs in a wheel, but checking in on them, asking them about their career aspirations, caring about them, saying, hi, how was your weekend? And that can be hard when you're working remote because people are so separate. You don't have those water cooler conversations as much. And that's where relying on getting good managers in, managers who know how to be people leaders, not just managers, getting tools and software to help you with that aspect, to help with keeping those check-ins, having that pulse, having good communication, making sure that leadership's communicating on all different levels. It's just a new game, using more technology, using more software to help businesses, to help HR get to employees.
I like how you just said that, Cassandra. It is a new game. It's a new reality. And that is seeing your talent as people and not numbers.
Yeah.
I like to say people over profit. And that's what this new generation of leaders are preferring, is they're feeling empowered. They want to have a voice in their career journey. And so, in 2023, the hopes are for HR leaders and senior leaders who are trying to go back to the old antiquated ways of leading, is you have to allow your talent to be a part of the growth journey. And so with that, in your experience as a leader, what are some of the early warning signs or top drivers of regrettable turnover?
I can kind of kick this off. For me, what I can start to sense turnover or just like the minute I start seeing disengagement after the hiring process. So the offer stage is a really exciting stage, and it's time for someone to step into something new that aligns for them and their next stage of growth. It's also super exciting for the company to fill the role. I love the offer stage as talent acquisition. It's like my favorite part of the job. But it's a telling sign on how long that excitement lasts after they begin. And I think that with early engagement with the employee, that's looking like things like cameras on during remote calls, asking questions during training, having an interest in meeting additional people, maybe outside of their team, and overall becoming part of the company. The company's visibility into all of this is, are we setting our new hires up for success? Are we introducing them to other people at the company, and other cultural initiatives surrounding new hires? So at Blueboard, for example, we offer new boarder rewards where they actually get to utilize one of our reward offerings when they first start. But we're also looking into revamping our onboarding buddy programs and building that relationships across departments so that the new hires can start to feel part of the company immediately. And if they're disengaged in that, I start getting the sense that maybe, it might not be the right fit, or turnover could come.
Shireen, you talk about defining success. I believe this generation's definition of success may be different than how we once defined it. And so how do you or your organization define success?
In the context of employee engagement?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I personally am still learning. I joined Blueboard about 7 months ago, so I'm still gaining an understanding of what this looks like long term. Success in engagement early on, I would say, falls into what I mentioned. I think the biggest thing is asking questions, having the new hires ask questions, and a desire to meet more people. One of our company values is build meaningful relationships. And so if we're starting to see this come into fruition by people wanting to meet others outside of their immediate group, that to me is successful. We are living out one of our values through that relationship building.
And even to add on to the first question there, I hate to use this term because I know HR individuals hate it, but the term quiet quitting, we hear it more and more. And of course, it's always like, oh, I hate hearing about quiet quitting because it's all over. But I do think it tells that story, kind of like when you are looking at new hires, do they still keep that energy? How long into the new hire process do they keep that energy? It's also the same, that lens of the rest of the employee experience. Like, are you starting to see your high performers, usually your passionate people who speak up? Are they starting to become quieter? And it's really, I think that's a huge indicator. And it's good to give the benefit of the doubt, because it might not be that employee is already checking out, but it might be that they're feeling like they are just drowning in the workload and they can't be as active. They're mentally exhausted. They're just trying to keep up with all that work. So that's always a good place to check in on them and say, hey, I noticed you've been a little quieter lately. Like, tell me what's going on. So come at it from a caring approach of what's going on. Is it just maybe something in your personal life is going on that's making it hard on you? What can I do as your manager or your leader to support you, to make you feel that empathy? Yep, care and empathy. Or, checking in, how's your workload going? Do you feel like you can't catch up? Okay, is it an obstacle? Let me remove that obstacle. What is it about it that is causing you to start being quieter? And be proactive about it. Don't wait until it's too far gone. And I think that's a lot of reason why using what you can, processes, practices to keep you proactive, seeing the storm ahead of time instead of waiting until it's like on you, where turnover is at that point where you just can't retain those people anymore.
I like what Dan says. He says, I love the conversation like this, but they fall flat when the manager is not actually engaging. They're more coming across like it's forced. Yeah. they're not genuine in the experience.
And I think that gets a good question. Are you investing in manager training this year? I see, I mean, there's multiple articles. I can't pull one out of my brain right now, but just showing that a lot of organizations are starting to invest more in manager training because they are your people on the ground who are building those relationships with employees. Gallup, Harvard Business Review, you name it, they always say managers have about 60 to 70% of that impact on employee engagement, because managers are really the example of upper leadership, the example of the company, the ones who are living out, emulating policies, practices. So are you investing in your managers and making sure that they are upskilled in those soft skills?
Right. And see, Cassandra, we call them soft skills, but I like to call them vital skills. I know ThinkHuman calls them power skills because they are. And oftentimes people, they leave not because of the technical competency, it's the emotional intelligence or the lack of emotional intelligence within a role. And Sherry says also bad managers gotta go. That's true. Oftentimes we promote the people who perform well instead of the people who are truly people-centered, leaders. Thank you, Leo. As Leo says, storms don't last forever. HR can be the rainbows.
Oh,
I love that.
I love that.
Cute.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also wanted to quickly call out a saying Tiana said it the other day. Tell it again. It was like, leave people better than you found them.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
Tiana.
Yes. So my life value or my life motto is to leave people better than I found them. And I live through that personally and professionally. I try to remind myself of that every day, whether it's as simple as just giving someone a smile or sitting there and being able to listen to what they have to say, to putting my all into a project that maybe I'm not the most passionate about, but I understand the importance of it in my role. So yeah, leave people better than you found them.
Right. And I love that, Tiana, because that shows sometimes we just got to put our big girl, big boy panties on, right? And say,
Yep.
look, I may not be as good as I want to be here, but I know that this is going to make an impact on my team. So I got to get outside of myself and do something that's going to make a larger impact for my team. Being a manager or a people leader, it's a selfless experience, because we're giving, we're opening up our hands to make a larger impact. And so Bridget says, thank you, Bridget. I call them human skills. Yes, human skills are very important. But sometimes we forget about that because we're just stuck in the rat race. Anything else? Any other drivers that we want to add or talk about? No? Sherry says, stop allowing lackluster managers to fail up. They need to find a better fit. And that's true. Because the employees who leave, remember, those are the employees that's either advocating for you or sharing a bad review.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who do you feel like owns the organization's turnover process? How much is the responsibility on the employee versus the leader, the HR, manager, or the organization at large?
Oh, this is a good question. I feel like so many organizations think HR is the only one responsible for turnover, and that is not it at all. And it really is a partnership. It comes down to even employees have a responsibility. I used to be that person beginning in my career who was more soft-spoken. I didn't want to create any issues or any waves, kind of a little bit that old school mentality of don't speak up, just do your work. And as I advanced through my career, I realized that I was actually letting myself and my team down when I did not speak up in a tactful way. You can still speak up very tactfully and respectfully and say like, hey, for me to be thriving in this role, like I really need this. I need more development, or I need a little bit more support from my manager. Like, I need to advocate for myself as an employee. So turnover, it's an employee's responsibility. It's a manager's responsibility to be checking in on employees, to be aware of employees. Managers should never be surprised if somebody quits. They should be aware of what is going on, what's motivating that employee, what that employee cares about. It's even the responsibility of leadership to set that foundation of the organization. Culture is something that we want to be built from the bottom up. We want employees involved in that, but it has a lot to do with how leadership emulates that culture, how they set up the business to support that culture through things like mission and values, behaviors, competencies. That's where it's so important to have that structure for talent acquisition. What kind of competencies, what kind of behaviors are you looking for? You don't just want a culture fit, you want a culture add, but you do need to find people that will bring that add to your culture. So you need some kind of clarity around that. And so I really do believe it's the responsibility of all the different layers to prevent turnover.
Yeah.
I completely agree with Cassandra. Couldn't have said it better, honestly. But I think also that it actually kind of ties into what Cassandra was saying earlier about communication. And I think that you can learn a lot through the employee engagement surveys, but also through effective one-on-ones. And so this is where like the leaders come in and take responsibility. I think that's the effective one-on-ones are where you're able to build that trust between the leader and the employee. And this is the opportunity to just genuinely get to know your employees, to ask the how are yous or the how I can support you, the growth and development questions. And then of course, work through any work related questions as well. But I think that these are the conversations that add up.
Yeah. I've been working really closely with our CEO over the past couple of weeks on overall cultural initiatives for 2023, which include employee retention. And we've been talking a lot about who owns these things. And to summarize kind of what Cassandra said, and adding a little bit of Tiana, I view the vision of culture as well as, addressing turnover, the vision being done by the founders, the direction and the strategy by the leaders and the HR group, and then the execution from the managers. Now, so it is that full partnership between all three, as well as the employees. So Tiana, you're talking about it in one-on-ones. Cassandra, you talked about it with having a caring approach, but having these authentic and vulnerable conversations where both parties are asking questions of where we might have misalignment in expectations, where we may not understand something that has been shared with us, etc. So it absolutely is a partnership for all parties.
And if I can just add a little bit more, articulating like something to use when we talk about turnover, because I know we're talking a lot about being so proactive and really building that foundation to prohibit turnover. But when you get to that place of turnover, also having the structure in place, and this is a little bit more where HR can work with the executive team around how do we track turnover, making sure that you have those numbers, because as a data person, I know that numbers give me the power to show what is going on. So tracking turnover, making sure that you have turnover articulated between, regrettable versus non-regrettable turnover, defining the difference, even looking at voluntary versus non-voluntary. They're not the same as regrettable versus non-regrettable, but having that information, even comparing it to total number of employees, total number of turnover, just getting the statistics. And then when you get to that place when somebody has announced that they're leaving, do you have a process in place for how you handle that notice when maybe they are somebody you want to try and retain? Does everybody have something different? Every department offers a different retention, bonus or retention amount. Does every department do something different? Or do you have a consistent process of, this is the person that has to approve whether or not we're going to offer this person something to stay. this is the range that we're going to offer this person so that we stay consistent across the business and are not unfair with a certain individual compared to another. And then who ultimately decides whether that person truly is regrettable or non-regrettable?
Oh,
Because
that's a good point.
we might like individuals, but are they truly people that we want to keep?
Yeah.
Beyond just liking them, we need to be
Yes.
able to articulate why we should keep them. What do they bring to the business? Are they somebody who has such in-depth knowledge that we can't replace? Or
Mhm.
maybe are they somebody who lives out our values so much that we don't want to lose them from a culture perspective? Just being able to be very specific and knowing the process around that piece when you do get to that last step of people have put in their notice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Tiana, I see you shaking your head.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And Debbie says pay equity is something that needs to be watched carefully in the business. You keep one and lose others due to pay inequities pertaining to turnover. Yeah, that's big. Thank you so much for sharing that, Debbie. So what are some ways that individual contributors, leaders, and orgs can do to, what are those damage control approaches or preventative methods that could be implemented from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, with the experience and responsibility of talent acquisition, my answer to this is a little bit more preventative. So knowing the role, I think, is a huge one, and what the evolution of the role looks like. So this is everything from having the idea of what the position is, putting someone into the seat, and then developing that talent. At Blueboard, we're using hiring plans and recruitment plans. So this helps me as the recruiter really understand the position. We also work on developing job descriptions for new roles. So a lot of times we're moving individuals into new positions at companies and saying, congratulations, you have a promotion. It's a brand new job. We're so excited. But we miss the step of drafting that job description for what that new role looks like. So as it's developing, we don't really know what the expectation of the position is. So by having hiring plans, job descriptions for every role, and really knowing the position, I think from a employee perspective with their contribution, we're all on the same page. The role is understood from HR, it's understood from the manager, and it's also understood from the employee perspective.
I think managing those expectations are extremely important, and Chelsea agrees with you. Yeah. And Lauren says so important. Yeah. And even, when I think about from a startup to an organization who's well established, managing those expectations, they look different, right? I believe, and Shereen, you talked about this, just having leaders who are vulnerable and honest about, well, we're growing through this. This is our growing pains. Elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, my experience personally is within startups and high growth organizations. So it is harder for me to speak to well-established organizations that have maybe structured career development paths. But at the end of the day, like, these one-on-ones that Tiana is talking about are a perfect moment to set those expectations. The minute something goes awry, and understanding, like, what should this look like moving forward, and having that conversation amongst the leader and the employee, that expectation setting really sets the tone. The other thing that we haven't, or I haven't highlighted, is recognition. Understanding where the employee is actually showing up and doing well, and recognizing those moments, because recognition ultimately leads to retention. And so that I would say as well, but keeping in mind my perspective is mostly from high growth startups. Yeah.
Another way to prevent turnover, and I think Shireen will probably agree with me here because her and I have talked about this, is onboarding. Building out, reviewing, revising your onboarding process.
Yeah.
It is so vital. This is the first impression. This is what lays the foundation. And there's even a statistic that stuck with me that I read on SHRM one time that was like 68 or 69% of employees are more likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experienced great onboarding, which is insane. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And as someone who has, of course, been through different onboarding processes, but also built out onboarding, my favorite tip is to put yourself in the new hire's shoes. From step one, you've signed the offer letter. Now, what would you like to see? What do you need to know? What does the process look like? What does the paperwork look like? What does new hire orientation look like? How do we prepare the leaders that have these new hires coming on board? How are they prepared to onboard their new hires and prepare them for their future within the organization? And then I think just taking it a step further is providing a new hire survey about 30 days during their 30 days. And this will also help you gather information to review and revise your onboarding experience.
Totally. We do 30, or I've done 30 and 90.
And 90.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, Tiana.
And something that, going beyond onboarding, because I agree, onboarding is so crucial, but even to recognize that we can't make assumptions for some of our longer tenured employees, because that's sometimes what I see is you make that assumption that only the new hires need that extra TLC, need that extra communication. And I've seen the assumption that we have amazing, autonomous, go-getter employees that don't need as much help when they're longer tenured. And in the engagement data, I will commonly see new hires on fire and longer tenured employees just feeling defeated.
Yep.
And usually when I start to dig in deeper, I realize they don't know how they fit into this newly evolved business. The business is changing all the time. The skills that are expected are changing all the time. And you've assumed that just because they've been at the business for a while, they've got it all figured out. But they themselves are kind of having an identity crisis of, how as an employee am I still making an impact? How can I update my own skills to still keep, consistent, keep up with everything? And that's where it's so important to not just have a really well-defined onboarding, but realize that you need to consistently help with role clarity, not just updating job descriptions, but updating those targets or those objectives, the one-on-ones, having that, hey, here are your projects. Do you have too many going on? Do you need me to help as your manager to prioritize? Just understanding that you need to communicate just as much with some of your longer tenured employees as your new hires, because they do need that support as well.
Yeah. And Tina says, very good point, Cassandra. Mike has a question. How can we tailor onboarding to match different personalities and ages?
I'm gonna have to pass this one to somebody else.
I think it's important to try different things within your onboarding. And again, the surveys are really important there as well. I think there's going to be individuals that, maybe understand the tech pieces of onboarding a lot quicker than maybe some of the other individuals. I think there's going to be individuals who maybe want to chat with maybe some of the leadership. I did that at a former organization where we did a lunch and listen with the CEO. There was 30 minutes where they got to meet the CEO and ask her any questions that they wanted. That was incredibly beneficial. Everyone loved that one. So I think just trying different things within the onboarding process for the different parties involved. And some are going to be wins, some are going to be losses. It's all trial and error. But I think that onboarding can be really fun to build out. You can really make it your own and tie it into the different individuals, tie it into the values and the organization as a whole.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
I completely agree. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Cassandra.
I was just going to say, even the best organizations sometimes realize that, oh, we need an overhaul on our onboarding. And as a startup, 15.5, we're still learning to scale, just as a lot of other businesses are. And so we realized our onboarding needed a second look. And we actually got a team together of not just HR individuals, but people who had onboarding experience before who had some great insights, and we all met together and talked about what can we do to improve. And it was, I think Sherry might have mentioned in the chat, like it was a cohort of different ages, different experiences, and we were all able to talk about, okay, well, one individual thought that things needed to be articulated better. Another individual was like, I'll go with the flow. I'll kind of figure out, fill in the gaps. But I do want to be able to see our leadership. I want to get a good impression from the start. So really just listening to your employees and being willing to change, being open-minded, taking that really great experience and actually using it.
Yeah, that will to implement new processes based on the recommendation from, your talent that may not have that much opportunities to really speak up, I think is very important. And so when you think about the strategies that are needed to re-engage those employees who may appear to be disengaged, what comes to mind for you?
From my perspective, a lot of it is that partnership between the manager, leader, and the employee. So acknowledgement of the disengagement. Cassandra talked about it earlier with just saying, hey, you're quieter, recently, just having that awareness that your employee is beginning to retract a little bit. I spoke to having recognition of the work that they're putting in and understanding the cause of the disengagement. My personal strategy that I love, which I don't know if leaders intentionally do this strategy, but ultimately like being hands-on as a leader, keeping in mind I'm with organizations that are between 80 to 150, 250 employees, but leaders that are willing to do the work with the employee. I think that this can support engagement and re-engagement in the employee because it's showing, yes, the job is tough. The manager gets visibility into the pain points of the process and then support that. I've worked with companies like, for example, here at Blueboard, our VP of engineering codes, our COO sends out recipient rewards. They're in the weeds with the team. So they're aware of what might be causing the disengagement, maybe more streamlined towards things like processes and the work itself. Culture driven in other ways, but me speaking more towards that manager, leader, and people partnership.
And to add to that, Sherry actually mentioned in the chat, I think sometimes you do need to be aware that it might be time to break up with some individuals, but that's your chance to still have an employee that respects your business and is loyal after they leave.
Yes.
To meet with them and say, hey, I understand we might not be the best fit for you anymore, but as your manager, how can I set you up for success for that next role? Like, how can I be your sponsor for that next role? And then you leave that employee with such a good experience. I know that there's, one company in my background that I would probably go back to because I had that type of manager that was like, I understand you need to go off on your own, find that perfect fit. And I would totally go back to that organization because I had that where they were like, okay, it's time to break up, but let's leave things good. And then if you can redirect, first listen, just listen to that employee, make sure that they feel like they're being heard. They've probably been speaking up maybe in those surveys or something and say, the workload's too much, or we don't have any direction. I don't know where we're going. And they might not have felt like enough action has been taken. So if you meet with them and say, I hear you, we're going to start doing something, talk about what you're going to do, that a lot of times can be the first good start.
Yeah. I was with an organization that called the people who left alumni. So that opened the doors for them to still stay connected, share resources, and potentially sponsor as a short-term resource throughout their career. Yeah. So with that, we have reached the hour where we want to share some valuable information with you. So Sophia, we're going to go through or discuss the service offering from each organization here. Hey, don't leave. This isn't your time to jet out, okay? Stay here. Our leaders today share their insights, perspective, resources with you. And all we ask of you is just a little bit of time to learn about each organization who is sponsoring this amazing webinar today. So go ahead, please. Anyone, feel free to start.
All right, so I'm of course speaking on behalf of 15.5, and throughout our conversation, you've heard me talk about engagement. You've heard me talking about upskilling your managers, checking in on employees, and 15.5 is really trying to have that holistic approach of, we do engagement surveys where we have this amazing portal that shows you all the nitty-gritty information, gives you that global database of how you compare against others. We have a performance system where we manage things. We make things easier for the HR team to do performance and to track how each employee rates. We do a manager training. We have some amazing certified coaches that do this training and coaching through Transform. And then within the system overall, we have like one-on-ones. We have an awesome check-in that just captures the diary of each employee each week. So really check this out. If you need one of these tools or software, we're here to help.
So I'm representing Blueboard, and some of the things that we talked about today is ultimately recognition can drive engagement, which ultimately would lead to retention. So Blueboard offers a recognition program. We're empowering companies to build meaningful partnerships with their employees. And the way that our team says it is it's through the gift of time. So ultimately, we're helping companies to get their team to say, thank you for all the hard work that you've done. Now go out and do something outside of work that will challenge your comfort zone, indulge in one of your passions, or try something new, and then come back to work and tell us all about it. So that partnership and that gift of time is really what we're doing through recognition.
All right. Hey, folks, new face. I'm Asia Smith from the ThinkHuman team. First of all, thanks to this panel of HR experts, and special shout out to Tiana. She's from Drata, but she's a dear friend of the ThinkHuman community. I am a facilitator and coach and community catalyst at ThinkHuman. And so for a lot of folks, I might be the first introduction. You might meet my teammate Fatma or Lauren, but overall, ThinkHuman is a leadership development company. We have a variety of different programs that support leaders at all levels in executive coaching, DEIB training. Our leadership programs really are focused on not the typical check of the box training. And so it really is about long-term behavior change. Our programs focus on mindset shifts and creating a shared understanding of what it means to be an emotionally intelligent leader. And so it was really great hearing folks talking about developmental one-on-ones, psychological safety, and how that ties into retention, because that's all part of the work that we do at ThinkHuman. It's really essential for me to mention that we believe that learning and development and DEIB are not separate pillars, but they're deeply intertwined. So you can look forward to that from our training. And really our goal is to help leaders create inclusive environments that support a culture of belonging. And so, for example, talent acquisition isn't our expertise. We have that on this panel. But for us, being an equitable and inclusive leader who coaches, nurtures, and retains talent to reduce regrettable turnover, that is our expertise. And so if you'd like to learn more about ThinkHuman, our tagline is unleashing the soul of your business. I'd love to connect with you. I'll put my link in the chat. And thanks again to our amazing panel and to everyone for being here today. It's really awesome.
Yes, and for those of you who are still staying with us, here's the SHRM code that we promised at the beginning of the hour. We want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to add value to you and your organization. So your next moderator, event host, me, Hakimia Jackson, please be sure to connect with myself as well as the amazing panelists here today. And so before we close, I would love to hear just one thing you would want the audience to walk away with pertaining to the topic that we discussed today, starting with Tiana.
Leave people better than you found them.
Love it. Shereen.
I would say I really like what Cassandra said, and sorry if I'm taking it, but not all turnover is regrettable. So be mindful of that is, prepare for it, but also leave room for more. So yeah.
And mine is be proactive. Don't wait until you have people turning over, but do the things like one-on-ones, do things like the, surveys, check-ins, pulse, care about your employees enough to be proactive.
And with that, we want to thank you. So in 2023, be sure to lead, be sure to love, and celebrate life. Blessings to you all. Bye. Thank you for your time.